This interview is for information only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this Stockbox interview.
Joining us today is Stephen West, Executive Chairman of Roquefort Therapeutics, listed on the London Stock Exchange with the ticker ROQ. How are you doing, Stephen?
Good morning, James. Yeah, I'm very well, thanks.
Good. So could you just introduce us to Roquefort Therapeutics, give us kind of a high-level overview of the company?
Yes, absolutely. So Roquefort Therapeutics is a main market listed biotech company. We are developing drug products through the preclinical phase prior to partnering or selling out to big pharma. So we recently acquired a company called Lyramid, which holds the largest IP portfolio to commercialize therapies around a novel disease target. And that target is called Midkine. And we'll be looking to treat cancer, autoimmune disorders, and chronic inflammatory diseases. Now, the important thing here is it's a novel disease target, and because of that, we'll be developing first-in-class drugs to block or inhibit this target called Midkine. So there's no other drugs in the market. This is all very unique. We'll be utilising RNA therapeutic style of drugs for the drug development rather than the traditional antibody approach. So it's a lot quicker and cheaper than the traditional way of doing it. We're fully funded for our current preclinical drug development program, and we aim to create significant value for shareholders by delivering these first-in-class drugs that I mentioned into the clinical trials in 2023, so not that far away.
Could you give us a bit more background on Midkine? What is it? What's the technology there? Why is it important?
Yes, sure. So Midkine is a heparin-binding growth factor protein. It's demonstrated to be involved in many disease settings. However, Midkine actually provides a positive function initially. So it's abundant in embryos and it helps the human body form. But at birth, it's essentially switched off and it's barely detectable in healthy adults. However, levels of Midkine dramatically increase in multiple diseases where it's consistently been shown to be on the scene of the crime. So it actively contributes to these disease processes. And there's been over 10 years of research, over $40 million worth of investment, and there's over 1,000 independent academic papers that validate the causal effects of Midkine. And if you can block or inhibit Midkine, the body's response to these various diseases, and there's a number of them, is significantly improved.
And you mentioned that it's going to be used to, this technology will be used to treat a range of conditions. What are these and what are the correlations between them? Why is it this group of conditions that you're looking to treat?
So, well, the interesting thing with Midkine is it is prevalent in multiple disease settings, essentially anything to do with inflammation. So the correlation between diseases is anything to do with inflammation, I guess. Midkine sort of pops up and interferes with the body fighting those diseases. So the hardest thing for us is we need to choose disease targets to initially develop our preclinical drugs for. So we're initially focused on the treatment of cancer tumours, where it's been demonstrated if you knock out Midkine, this significantly decreases the size of tumours. And specifically within cancer, we're also focused on immunotherapy responses as well within the body. So I'm not sure if everyone's aware of recent advancements in checkpoint inhibitor drugs, but that's kind of been a blockbuster drug that's been developed over the last few years in the treatment of cancer, where it's been had efficacy rates of 50% in treatment of melanoma, which is incredible. However, we're focused on the other 50% where it doesn't work. And it's been demonstrated that Midkine interferes with these drugs working. So that's our initial target, cancer immunotherapy. Once we establish efficacy in cancer, knocking out Midkine in cancer, we'll then turn our attention to other disease indications, which may be COVID-19, it could be anti-inflammatory diseases or autoimmune disorders.
So a lot of this technology, Stephen, and a lot of these developments are based around a technique called gene silencing. Could you give us a bit more of an understanding about what this is?
Yeah, sure. So gene silencing technology is essentially a new generation of drugs. Now, so in many diseases, including cancer, the increased levels of specific protein factors directly causes the initiation of that disease or the associated dangerous symptoms of that disease. So one strategy to reduce the levels of these protein factors is to stop their production. And you stop it by switching off the gene that makes the protein using gene silencing technology. So that's the background behind it. So gene silencing drugs can be designed to specifically interfere with the target gene, and will not recognize any of the other 30,000 genes that go into making a human body. And they do that through DNA and mRNA. And there are different styles of gene silencing technologies as well. Now I won't go into the different styles of those, but just to say that we are developing one certain style around that. And I think, it's just to repeat what I said earlier, the success and quick acceptance of the COVID-19 mRNA vaccines, I think, is a real testament to this new generation of drugs. So it's a very exciting space to be involved in.
Mm-hmm. And could you give us an idea of the market opportunity for these treatments? I mean, cancer is obviously huge, but on focusing on COVID, because is that going to be a big focus in the future? And how important is COVID in your kind of idea of what you can treat?
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. So I think the first thing to say is COVID is here to stay, so it's not going anywhere. So we need to live with it. So we're going to need treatments to alleviate symptoms and treat long COVID, particularly long COVID, I think, going forward. So, but I think we very much acknowledge it's a very competitive space out there. So there's hundreds of drugs being developed in that space. So we're not throwing a lot of resources at this. What we're looking to do, and the beauty of the type of drug that we're developing, is we can more or less piggyback off the work that we're doing on the cancer drug development and create a potential drug target for long COVID, for instance, very quickly and very cheaply. And we can put that out as a potential drug target. However, we won't be investing most of our time or money in that. Our main target, as I said, is cancer. And in terms of the size of these markets, I mean, if you look at cancer, inflammatory diseases, autoimmune diseases, and COVID as well, you're looking at a total combined market size of over $300 billion. So it's absolutely massive. And then if you break it down to the cancer, which we're focused on, that's $75 billion by itself. So if we can penetrate any of these markets, it's going to be incredibly lucrative for the company. And I think it's worth looking at some of the success cases in the RNA space as well. I mean, they're developing different target drugs. However, they're utilizing RNA therapeutics. So there's companies called Silence and Skyhawk. In the last few years, both of those companies have been taken out for over $2 billion by Big Pharma. And they were probably 6 to 12 months ahead of where we are at the moment. So although it sounds almost ridiculous that we're targeting those type of valuations at some point, if we have success, it's definitely achievable, those type of valuations.
And my understanding, just from reading the news, but also from your website, is that there have been, and as you've mentioned in this interview, there have been big developments in understanding the kind of genetic basis for life, and a lot of the science behind biotechnology has made leaps and bounds recently. And I think that there's been quite a bit of government R&D support for that. How important do you think that is, and do you expect it to continue?
Yeah, I think, well, yes to both. I think it's very important, and I absolutely think it will continue. I think if you look at, for instance, specifically our operations, which at the moment are in Australia, we get a 42.5% cash rebate from the government. So it's not a tax credit, it's actual cash coming back from the Australian government on any money that we invest in this space. And we are actively commencing a process over here to try and get access to UK government grants as well, obviously being a UK based company. So it's a very important part of drug development. It's you're basically talking about a new generation of drugs here. It's going to be incredibly important going forward, and I think it needs all the support it can get.
Could you give us kind of a roadmap for the company going going forward? I know you recently announced quite a significant milestone, so maybe you want to say something on that as well.
Yes, sure, absolutely. So, yes, so we're currently in the preclinical trials, as I think I mentioned earlier. However, we aim to have drugs in clinical trials in Q3 2023. So that's not very far away. So it's a very aggressive roadmap we've set ourselves. So there's a number of milestones along that way. And the first significant milestone that we hit recently was detailed in our RNS. And essentially, we've been designing and testing a specific style of RNA drug. And the results have been very positive, and that's enabled us to identify some drug lead compounds. And so these drug lead compounds are now being used in vitro experiments in human cancer cells. Now, this is a key part of drug discovery, and it's part of generating some more IP for the company, which is where the value inherently is around these drug compounds. So we're aiming to lodge a new patent application around this work very shortly, at which time we'll be able to provide further details on the style of RNA therapeutic drug that we've been developing, and a bit more detail on the testing that we've been undertaking. We have to be very careful about what we say at the moment because we haven't lodged a patent application yet. But as soon as we do that, we'll be able to provide more detail, which is very interesting, I've got to say, to the market. And once we've done that as well, we'll be moving into cancer in vivo efficacy testing. So actually within the body testing rather than in the lab.
And would you be able to give listeners some numbers in terms of funding and kind of how much and how you plan to spend this over the next few years as you go through these steps?
Yeah, sure. So we recently raised £3 million in December last year. And that's been earmarked for our preclinical drug development program. And so we're fully funded for the program that we're doing at the moment. So there's no intention to come back to the market and raise further money. Now, most of that money, you wouldn't be surprised, is going to go into the drug development program. There was obviously some overheads associated with that, but we run a very tight ship here. We have a very small but capable management team, and we have some strategic advisors that help on the sides as well. And you'll see that we announced recently the appointment of Professor Trevor Jones as a strategic advisor to the board. And I urge people to look at his resume on our website and also that RNS. I mean, he used to head up R&D for the Wellcome Trust, so he certainly knows what he's doing, and he's very intrigued by what we're doing here and wants to get involved in what we're doing.
And in terms of potential risks or challenges, could you give us an idea of what these could be and how you've accounted for them?
Sure, yeah. So, there's the usual risks associated with our industry. I think specifically in the workflow that we've got over the next 18 months, the key risks will be whether we see the efficacy that's required in the specific drug development that we're doing, or there may be some toxicity issues in the drug development that we've done as well. So you need to sort of jump those hurdles before you can go into the clinic. However, we actively address these risks as part of our program. We do a staged approach as well. So we address these risks at each stage of the process. So we think that we've got that well covered. I think it's worth mentioning as well is we're not just targeting one or two diseases here. There's multiple disease targets here. So multiple kicks on goal, essentially. So that mitigates the risk hugely as well. I think just finally as well, the style of drug that we're doing, the specific style of RNA drug leads to lower risk in those areas as well.
I saw that your focus is on UK, Australia, and European markets. Why is that? And the follow-up to that is, do you think the glaring omission there is the US market, which is a huge market? Do you think that could be a potential challenge going into the future?
No, I mean, it's a very good question. I mean, the reason the easiest one is Australia. Why are we in Australia? I mean, that's a legacy issue. I wouldn't say it's an issue. It's a legacy of acquiring Lyramid, which is an Australian-based company. And actually, Australia is a great place to develop drug targets as well because of the government assistance, which I mentioned earlier, so 42.5% cash rebate. But also there's, especially the cancer target that we're going for, there's some institutes in Australia which are world leaders in cancer treatment. So we will be looking at having collaborations with some of these leading institutes as well. So that's the attachment to Australia. UK attachment is obviously our listing here. And
if you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like or a retweet. Well, subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programs at stockboxmedia.com.
Well. I mean,
Thank you for watching.
It's a sequence though, so we need to make sure we're protected by patents before to jump into the jungle, I guess, is an analogy I'd use.
Last question I'll ask you is just to give everyone a summation of what we've spoken about. So 3 reasons why to invest in Roquefort.
So I think the first one is the value proposition. That's the glaring one to me. I mean, our market cap is £7 million and we've got nearly £3 million in cash. We've got a roadmap set out for the next 18 months. There's going to be multiple value inflection points along the way. And our aim is to partner or even be taken out by Big Pharma by the end of 2023. So we've got an aggressive value building process here over the next 18 months. So that's the first one, value proposition. I think the second one is the uniqueness of what we're offering here. So it's a unique investment opportunity where you can invest in an early stage biotech company. That's not the uniqueness, but the uniqueness is we have a novel disease target. It's very hard to find a novel disease target these days. So no one else is developing drugs around this target. And because of that, we're doing first-in-class drugs as well. So there's no other drugs doing what we're trying to do. So we can create huge value here by wrapping up the IP around this, which is exactly what we're doing. And I think the other thing to mention as well is we're starting to open up the whole Midkine. It's almost coming back to your earlier question about Australia, is we're trying to introduce Midkine into the UK and then into the US. And by doing that, we need to bring on some experts that believe in what we're doing and can introduce us to other experts as well. So that's why we thought it was very exciting that Professor Trevor Jones, who I mentioned earlier, has come on to advise us. And so we want to get more people like Professor Jones involved with what we're doing here. And take notice in what we're doing and can believe and see what we're achieving here.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for your time. Stephen West, Executive Chairman of Roquefort Therapeutics.
No, thank you very much.